Tonight, terror in the heartland after an Oklahoma woman is beheaded at work. The murder suspect, 30-year-old Alton Nolan, a just-fired employee, was, according to police, trying to convert co-workers to Islam. With me now, retired U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Zuhdi Jasser. Good evening, Zuhdi. It's nice to have you on this evening. Big question.
Thank you,
is this guy a lone wolf, part of a jihad, or a nut job?
Well, I can't tell you how important it is to abandon this concept of lone wolf. He's no more a lone wolf than an individual flu virus is a lone wolf among millions of flu viruses around the world. The virus is the ideology of radical and political Islam. The only difference between ISIS and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the ends is the same, but the means may be different. They may be not as brazen in what they do. So this jihadist really wants to see, he hates America. If you look at his Facebook page, it's all about anti-Americanism. It's a mantra that the lens that he views the world is a narrative of anti-Westernism and pro-Islamism. So there are those that do it by beheading and violently, and there are those like the Brotherhood in Egypt that does it through elections and so-called peaceful means, but it's basically the same anti-Western ideology that radicalizes them.
And, you know, let's talk about what the radicalization of inmates in prison. And my last guest, Steve Emerson, was talking about the fact that one of the first things they're supposed to do, apparently as part of an initiation of some sort, is to try to recruit other people to Islam. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different mechanisms in which while they're in prison, they try to seek redemption, and the imams in many of these prisons are not vetted, so they're taught about jihad and that the way to the gates of heaven are jihadization. We've seen a multiple number of cells like the one in New York last year that was convicted on trying to commit acts of terror only months after leaving prison. So what happens is these, yes, are vulnerable populations that are fed on by these global ideologues, but the bottom line is that if we're going to defeat this, there's a new Cold War, as you so eloquently mentioned in your opening statement. It's an ideology that we're fighting, and if we miss the target and continue to say it's a whack-a-mole counterterrorism program, whether it's in our prisons, in some of our mosques, as Muslims we need to wake up that it's not just violence, but it's the ideology that teaches our kids, teaches our youth that America is anti-Muslim, anti-Islam. That's a false narrative that we as Muslims need to defeat.
Well, and you know, when you talk about the radicalization in prison, Zuhdi, wouldn't it be interesting if they did some kind of exit interview to assess whether or not there is this radicalization? I mean, I'm sure that they can't find out for sure, but there's got to be some following of these guys, so for the protection of innocent Americans.
Absolutely, and there's so much we can do. Because of political correctness, where we can't even talk about jihad or Islamism, we aren't even putting any resources behind some of the projects we should be doing as they exit to find out what it is. The NYPD did a seminal study on homegrown terrorism in 2007 that talked about the steps of jihadization, from engaging a sanctioner to finally becoming militant, and how they go from the stadium seats to actually being on the field of jihad. And we're not studying that anymore because of political correctness. This administration is surrendering, doesn't want to enable reformers, but actually wants to enable Islamist apologists, as we see in speeches and other aspects in which brotherhood ideologues are actually advising our president rather than actually reform.
All right, Zuhdi Jasser, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Judge.
All
Appreciate it.
And coming up, the war on ISIS. But wait, you're not going to believe how little our own Secretary of State knows about the Syrian rebels the U.S. is arming. That's next.